purpose is having useful boards. You need people who are both passionate and knowledgeable.
Before even the board is put together, everyone needs to be on the same page.
Hello everyone, welcome to Entrepreneurship 101, and hello to our audience tuning in online. I'd like to welcome tonight's speakers. Tony Redpath is a mentor to entrepreneurs at Mars, and his expertise is in environmental, advanced materials, and manufacturing markets. He brings us a wealth of experience, including several high-tech startup companies that he has founded and or taken public. And what Tony is most famous for here is for being one of the creators of Entrepreneurship 101. So all of this is thanks to him. I think we owe him a big round of applause. Also joining Tony for tonight's discussion is Karan Walia, who is the co-founder of Kloop. Karan is going to be sharing his perspectives on creating a board of directors and advisors, and he'll tell you more about his company when he comes up here as well. Please welcome tonight's speakers. Thank you.
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Entrepreneurship 101. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist saying that one more time. So tonight we're going to talk about boards of directors, boards of advisors. Talk a little bit about the difference between the two and some of the key factors in creating them and getting value from them. So I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes or so just to do a bit of an introduction, and then Karan and I are going to sit down and have a conversation. I've embedded some questions in the presentation. Not going to try and answer them. We'll try and do that during our discussion, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Okay? So the first thing I want to say, I was telling Marielle, I was quite daunted when she first asked me to participate in this, because I looked at the talk that was given last year. That was given by Dave Litwiller, who's the EIR at Communitech. It's incredible. I can't top what he did for detail. I think there's about 56 slides. It's very rich in detail about all aspects of governance. So, rather than attempt to duplicate that, I just told Marielle you should have just replayed his talk. It's online on the Mars website and the Entrepreneur's Toolkit, and of course you all know and use that frequently. Or you can look it up under the E101 section. I strongly suggest you check that out for rich details. Today, we're going to try and step back a little bit and look at kind of the top level issues. So, this I have stolen from Dave's talk. Just to quickly point out the differences between a board of directors and a board of advisors. They are very different beasts, and a board of directors, if you look on the middle column, key thing here is obligations under statutory or case law. Board of directors is a legal entity. Thank you. It has responsibilities and, oopsie. Here we are. It has fiduciary duties, that is responsibility for managing money. It has obligations that the Canada Revenue Agency will hold it to. It is a legal, very important structure. It's elected by shareholders. Its purpose is to oversee your business affairs, and also, if you're the CEO, it's to hire and fire you. Okay? It sets its own agenda, and if you're the manager, you are responsible to provide any information it wants because it has an obligation to be informed about the business of your company. A board of advisors, on the other hand, is a far different beast. It's generally chosen by management. There are no obligations other than those that are created by management. Advisory boards, by their very nature, advise. You can listen to them or not, as you see fit. They have no authority, which means they have no responsibility, because you can never separate those two. Board of directors has responsibility and concomitant authority to go with it. So that's just a quick overview of the two. Point is, they should be useful. As Aaron had said, the whole purpose is having useful boards, and we'll get into this a little bit in our conversation. So let's look at the two, just a little bit of detail. So if I look here at the hierarchy for a board of directors, I don't know, it doesn't show up quite as well. That's supposed to be a royal purple because shareholders are at the top of the heap. They own the company. They elect the board. That's a royal blue, not quite as high in the hierarchy as the shareholders. Board hires and fires the CEO and helps set strategic direction. They shouldn't be getting their hands in there running the company, but they help set strategic direction, and the CEO hires and fires management. Okay, that's a fine theory. So, but here you are with your friend. The two of you are co-founders of a company. Okay, that's it. There's you two. You own it. Who's the board? Well, it's you two. Who's management? It's you two. You can simultaneously hold a shareholders meeting, a board meeting, and a senior management meeting in an elevator, okay? And as long as you and your partner agree on things, it'll be a really short meeting. So all this talk about the liabilities and responsibilities and that, when you're starting as a little micro company, it's really moot. But you are ambitious. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. You're planning on going global. So what you are hoping to do is get to this. And if you ever get invited to an event at the Royal Bank 40th floor, take the opportunity, because you can look in at RBC's boardroom, which looks like this, and it's kind of like the holodeck on the Enterprise, all the AV materials in there. So you're moving towards that, where all of those hierarchies and all of those responsibilities become very, very important. So with that, however, you start here, you end up there, and you're going between the two. So here's a question. When should you start getting really serious about your board? And I can tell you, there's a certain debate within the investment community. Those folks who invest really early on raw startups, this board stuff is a bit of an overhead. It's just a cost. You move a little further downstream to venture capital funds. They like structure, authority, if they want to sit on the board. So at some point, you do need to get serious. And I think we're going to kick that subject around a little bit, because it is important to, your investors are the ones, right, as they're co-shareholders with you now, they have a say in how your board is going to work. So another question that we're going to talk about, and Aaron's already touched on this in that intro, who do you have on your board? What makes a good board, okay? And we're going to talk something about that. So, advisory boards, and I found this quote, and I give you a chance to read it. Okay, your advisory board, again, as Aaron has said, should be challenging you. They should be a source of extra information. And advisory boards can be different, can play different roles in different sectors. And again, you're a startup. Can you tell which one is the CEO? She's the one with a laptop because she has to take notes of all this. You know, your advisory board could be colleagues, potential customers, and it's a brainstorming session. That's an advisory board. You know where I'm going with this. That is a United Nations advisory board. And I'm not even going to go there as to how functional or effective something like that could be. A full spectrum. So you're starting out. You're going to be more on this side, but keep in mind, you're building for success. So just because you start here, you need to be thinking, where am I going? You need to be one step ahead as to where am I going with my board of directors and with my advisory board. So who do you have on your advisory board? And I have to share this with you because I found it. There is a California Artichoke Advisory Board. Who knew? So you're an artichoke grower. Who would you choose to have on an advisory board? A lot of artichoke growers? I wouldn't. I would want a climatologist. I would want someone who could help me understand what is likely going to be happening to my growing season. I'd want a couple of really well-known chefs to tell me, you know, is my product, could it be the it product? I'd like a couple of major grocery chains. I want their input as to what the customer is asking for. I want everything that I don't necessarily have in-house, but I want those that can help me see the future. And ad boards in life sciences companies for successful drugs that are on the market, there will be an advisory board for that drug of key opinion leaders in the area or for the disease where that drug is used, and they will meet twice a year. Since they're doctors, they will generally meet in very nice locations, and they get a handsome stipend, and their whole purpose is to be the eyes on the ears on what is happening out with the patient base and to advise the company as to where things are going with that particular drug. So that's very specific, not necessarily the same in other sectors, but ad boards can do a variety of things dependent on the nature of your company. So, how do you get the people that you want on, frankly, your directors, your board of directors or your advisory board? Well, if I was on the California Artichoke Advisory, trying to get advisors, I would look for a climatologist who loved artichokes. That's easier said than done, and I use that obviously as an example. You want people, as Aaron has said, who are interested in what you do and some ideally passionate about what you do, but not necessarily exactly in your space. And that's a challenge, finding them. So those are the lead-off questions I wanted to use this talk to do, to set up a bit of a framework and some key questions. And so I'm going to sit down and let's continue. This is a conversation. So Karan, I'm going to ask you maybe to give the folks a little bit more of the story of yourself and Kloop, and just to get them started to understand where you're coming from.
Absolutely. So I think this is very relevant for the context of this. So I founded Kloop in 2012 with my partner, who was the other co-founder, Anton Mamonov, in a lab. at York University when I was in my last year. So on the notion and on a vision to build AI capable of determining human feelings, how we perceive and reason as humans. We released our first ad product last summer, and basically it's a mobile ad platform that lets you target consumers from social media apps and then serve them a piece of advertisement on their mobile apps. So based on what they're saying, their conversations, and their feeling towards topics that brands are really interested in tapping into and engaging with consumers. So that's a bit on what we do. And the company, we launched last summer. And what's very interesting is because, and really relevant, we reached out to Mars in early 2013 to get paired up with strategic advisors. In fact, one of our advisors is sitting amongst the crowd. He's a volunteer advisor at Mars, who actually later became an investor throughout our journey and is now a part of the board. So I think that's been very interesting on how that progressed in terms of developing that relationship with strategic advisors, reaching out to individuals that have experienced what you're about to experience, that have managed a company, a team, large enough of what you want to get to. So I think that's been something that's very impactful for us. We also brought on another advisor from here at Mars, who later became an investor in the company, and basically he was able to. He was an entrepreneur. He started his company and managed to scale it to basically where he managed 400 to 500 employees. Was managed to sell the company to a Fortune 500 company. So surrounding yourselves with strategic, I guess, advisors and soliciting them, I think is really, really important.
I have to add, if you check out the Kloop website, under the career section, they offer breakfast, lunch, snacks and beverages all day.
All day.
And ping pong tournaments.
Yeah,
so, yes.
And we're hiring.
And they're hiring. Okay. So your Kloop's about 18 months old, thereabouts. How many board members do you have?
Right now it's 4.
Okay.
We're looking for a 5th one.
Okay. So did you start off just, again, I have sort of talked about a pathway.
Yeah.
So how has your board evolved, and what triggered any changes in the makeup of the board?
Well, so our board members actually are the first advisors who later became investors and strategic investors that we brought on board as board members. And really what we looked at is what they bring to the table, their experience. One of the most important part being is that they come from a background in the space we are in, which is advertising and marketing. And the other individual in the technology space that has experience in scaling a tech company to the enterprise level.
So it's interesting because you actually had advisors who became board members, so you didn't have to go out and find them. No. They had been coaching you when you created the company. That's actually very interesting.
Absolutely, and I think it's because we got them very, very excited about what we're doing. And they believed in us, that they were willing to write a check. And anyone who's willing to write a check to you as a strategic advisor, I think they should be a part of your board.
I think that's
because they believe in you.
There's nothing more serious than a check. in terms of expressions of interest, for sure. So you said you're looking for a fifth,
Yes.
an independent,
Yes, an independent.
and how's that? I would say, how's it going, and what are the challenges in doing that?
So I think we're actually in a transition where, for example, we just finished 2 rounds of funding. We're looking to raise another significant round. We're looking towards VCs. So now that could be an interesting play as well. Perhaps bringing in a strategic VC on board. That's definitely one of the options we have. Or for example, bringing on a strategic client on board.
Okay, so actually you touched on 2 points that I had in my notes on the questions. One is, I think it's true that it's funding events that often trigger the need to grow, both in terms of maturity and sometimes in terms of numbers, your board, because I certainly know a true VC, when they come in, will want a board seat. And I can tell you from past experience, if you are either fortunate or unlucky enough, let you judge, to get 3 VCs come in, they will all want a board seat, and you will have to tell them, no, there's only one, and they're going to have to fight it out amongst themselves as to which one of them gets that, and it gets ugly. But it is in the nature of VCs to say, I put my money in, I want to watch how it's spent, I want to be there. And so I think that's a key transition point. But in my experience, it's also true, that's when they say, I mean, it's easy in a sense there, you know who you're getting. It's the fund that invested in you. They also say, we'd love to get an independent on the board. And again, my experience is that's often a challenge. And I don't know if you're looking for that now.
Well, we actually are.
Yeah.
And the approach we've taken is that based on the industry you're in, whether it's another aspiring CEO of a Fortune 500 company who may not be an investor or may not want to invest, but that's someone, if someone that's you look up to, could be definitely an option as an outside.
So why would they come on your board? What's the quid pro quo? To get a big name, someone associated with a large customer or someone big in the industry, why would they join your board? The crass thing is, what's in it for them?
Definitely. So one is let's take a step back and see what we're doing as Kloop. We're trying to bring feelings back to advertising. We're trying to change how we currently advertise, which is just retargeting consumers, not knowing who he or she is. And I think what really excites when we speak to our clients, when we speak to potential customers, is our approach, is our disruptive approach. And once they see that and they get excited, what we're seeing is that everyone wants to get involved. And I think someone who does get that excitement, is seeing that excitement, and is willing to get involved and is willing to help, you should definitely consider it as an option.
And I think that's, again, that kind of resonates with what I have seen, that you are a window on something new. And they get a ringside seat at watching what happens there. It doesn't cost them any investment, but they will be strategic in picking boards to work on where they really say, this looks like a whole new area, and this is a great opportunity to actually learn firsthand what's going on from a very privileged inside position.
Absolutely.
So now, this is not a fair question, because it's a bit rhetorical. Do VC investor board members actually bring value to the board? I should have asked, are there any VCs here? I need to be a bit careful with that question. It is a given, and I won't put you on the spot for that, since you're maybe talking to VCs, and we don't want your answer taped. I don't have to face them again. It's highly variable. You know, what a VC brings is a good Rolodex and a good network, right? They bring money to the table, but they invest in many companies, they co-invest with other funds. One of the key things that they bring to you is that broader network. Whether or not the VC rep on your board actually delivers that, to be perfectly honest, can be highly variable. There are some who are absolutely fantastic, and I've had that personal experience. There are some who are just sitting on their BlackBerry. They've got so many companies they're supposed to be looking after. They're trying to put a fire out on something else, and they often don't add a lot of value to the mix. So, I mean, I think it is key. If you're at a stage of growth, you need the level of capital that you would get from a VC. You need them, but look carefully as who's actually going to be working with you on the board, because I'm going to come back to this that you've really hit on. You need people who are both passionate and knowledgeable, and who will really make things happen for you. They have fiduciary obligations, but that can be done just managing things carefully. To go that extra mile when you're challenged and to really help you with something. And that's where bringing on an external, they have networks. They could say, well, I can call so-and-so who can call so-and-so, and maybe bring in that named person that can help you.
Absolutely. And if your startup is fortunate enough and is experiencing significant traction, I think you can be picky. You can be picky in who you choose. Talk to as many VCs or advisors to get to know them better. Put them to the test. Ask them, okay, and then see whether they can deliver or not. And just to see are they all talk or are they delivering as well? If they say, I can get you in touch with him or her, or I can get you doors open there, and tell them, okay, do it. Send that email. And once it's done, you know what? I'll give you this many stock options right after we close that deal.
And that you just touched on, I think, two really key points. I'm going to ask, how many people here know of companies who have an astronaut on their board? I see it so many times. It's a name. It's brand recognition. There are very few companies that can benefit by having an astronaut on their board. I'm sorry. And I don't mean to be critical of astronauts. They are great in their area. The other great thing is retired US senators, state senators particularly. They're a name. They're a big name, and I'm singling out two groups to make really a generic point. Never go for the big name who will simply do nothing. Most of the big names have all sorts of people asking. It's to lend their name to this. They don't actually expect to get their hands dirty and help you. And I personally have very little sympathy for that. There are occasionally times, yes, you get involved in regulatory issues and that. Never a nice place to be, but that can be useful. But in my experience, it is seldom useful, and I know this because we once took a Florida state senator on a fly fishing trip on the Miramichi to get his advice. I won't take that any further. There there are times when one does that. That should not be on your mainstream path for a good functioning board. Again, you need people who can really help and who are really willing to dig in and help you succeed.
Absolutely.
So I'm just thinking, let's switch a little bit to advisory boards. Again, and I should touch on sorry, I'm going to come back to one thing you had said, compensation for board members. And that can be board members, either board of directors or advisory boards. You know, what are the real tools? You mean, you're a startup. Yeah. You don't have money. But you want to get a big name in to spend time with you. What's the comp?
So one of the things I mentioned was stock options. You can definitely allocate a certain amount just for board members or your advisory board, and set it up in a way where they're only compensated once they've delivered, right? So you don't want to just...
There goes your astronaut.
Yeah. And that's something we've done and have implemented, and what that does is that it makes them work for it after certain milestones or certain deliverables. The stock options, they vest over time. That's it.
And that actually ties in with this whole question of when do you start getting formal with your board? Because if it's just you and a partner, co-founders, you probably haven't created a formal stock option plan, because stock options are voted on by the board. So you need a somewhat, first off, it will cost you money to create a stock option plan. And it generally gets done when you get an investor, when you get investment, and there's a shareholder agreement. And as part of that, you do the plan. And that now creates a tool, the ESOP, to both motivate staff and those directors you want to bring on board.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's again, it's a question of what is right for the stage that you are at, and as you grow, financing and other type activities will tend to trigger things that open up possibilities that allow your boards to evolve. So coming back then to an advisory board, again, what do you think is the best bet? Customers? Yeah, taking away the artichoke example, who would you get on an ad board for Kloop?
For Kloop. So you based on the space we're in, like we're in the advertising, and there's so many, in terms of how this industry works, we have holding companies, and there are not too many of them, which own media companies, agencies, and creative agencies. Now, we need to be very careful of bringing in, if we do bring on, for example, someone from one of the agencies, the other one might get upset. So it's a bit tricky bringing a client on board in our case. So who do you look to? You can look to individuals that have experience or have experience. It doesn't have to relate to your industry, but have built companies and basically have experienced what you're about to experience and where you want to take the company to. Whether next year or this year you want to get to 10 or 20 or $50 million in sales. If they have that track record, bring in someone like that.
I'm not going to say this because I just turned 65, but recently retired executives can be a great source, both for boards and advisory boards. By being retired, they no longer have an affiliation with any one player, but the recently retired is because they know, don't bother talking to those guys. They're last to adopt. These ones are much more proactive and will be more engaging. And the other question, when you take someone who's retired, it's the snow in the driveway question. If you have a board meeting scheduled and it snowed the night before and there's 8 inches of snow, are they going to shovel it and show up? Or, nah, I'm just going to stay in bed. Again, it's that sense of commitment, but that can be a pool of experience that is really relevant, but has no ties associated with it. So we'll do 1 or 2 more questions, I think, and then we'll sort of open the floor to you folks. I do want to make a comment. Someone has to stand up here for the life sciences companies, and I'm not sure how many here are interested in that sector. What you will often see in a pharma or life sciences company is a medical advisory board. And typically that is full of key KOLs, key opinion leaders. They will be researchers, they will be doctors, so they have no real commercial affiliation, but they have an interest in the drug, the product that you are bringing to market because it serves their patient community. So their interest in helping you is they actually think that what you're bringing to market will really help them do their job for patients. But you want those that, again, in pharma and life sciences, it's so, people are cautious about adopting. The KOLs are the ones that people look to who publish the leading papers. And if they're on your scientific advisory board, then those are the ones whose name you want to borrow, frankly, because they actually know what they're talking about and it's really relevant. There can, I think, be a bit of that. Folks who have been to E101 before know I'm listen, I still use a Brownberry, okay? But there are online mavens, right? There are YouTube, there are the influencers out there. Yeah. And sometimes someone like that actually has access to spreading a lot of information and receiving a lot. And that can be very useful if they're willing to serve.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably just about enough of our questions. And so there are microphones in the center, I guess. And we're going to open the floor to questions. And I should also say to questions, any questions from those watching online.
There's a question online. I think I'm interpreting this correctly. It says, are there professional boards available as a consulting service?
When you get to public companies, there are senior people who are professionally board members. That's what they do. I don't know of a consulting company. I do know that headhunters, who will look for C-level people, many of those will also headhunt board members for a fee, of course. But there certainly are professional headhunters who will help you. I'm assuming that most of you are probably not at the stage of doing that yet, but that is an option as you grow and you need to find extra people. So, gentleman out here.
Yeah. Hey, you guys touched on this briefly, sort of from a different angle, but how often have you run into conflict of interest problems where you want someone to be your advisor, but the company that they're working with has some sort of clause in their contract where they're not allowed to work with you because you're a competitor of some sort?
That's a great question. So you should actually avoid bringing that particular individual on board because of the conflict. But unless that individual really is going out of his or her way to help you out and is committing, then I think that's something he or she may take back to management and see how you can sort that out.
Yeah, I think certainly on a board of directors, because of the fiduciary responsibility, they have an obligation to the shareholders of the company. They cannot have a conflict that they cannot recuse themselves from. And both on boards of directors and advisors, as Karan has said, I know of many people who said, I need to go back and get buy-in from senior management that it is okay to do that. And a conflict of interest, I'll tell you, in a country like Canada, where you guys represent a significant portion of the the high-tech pool, it's almost impossible to avoid all conflicts. The important point is to have people formally signed up that if there is one, they will declare it. You need transparency. And you can let the rest of the board decide whether to boot them out or let them stay in but not comment, or to say you have to leave the board. But the key is transparency and a willingness to deal with it, as opposed to saying we cannot have anybody who has any conflict. The pool of talent is sufficiently small. You'll quickly run out of options. And again, you want people who know something about what you're doing. Is almost, natural that there may be some conflicts.
Okay, thanks. And one other thing was, do you guys advise against, I'm sure when a lot of people think of their advisor, people who have young companies are thinking of a friend they know or a family friend. Do you guys advise against those sort of connections, or, is that something that you guys practice?
The uncle who's a real estate lawyer? No. It's well-intentioned, and that may help when you're at the friends, family, and fools stage of investment. But I can guarantee you the moment somebody is putting some serious money into you, you will be told that uncle has to go. The same with good friends. Again, I shouldn't be so hard on uncles. If they can contribute, yes. But so often they are brought on because they're somewhat older and the founder knows them, but they don't have expertise. And again, you only have so many board seats, and you only have so much time you will spend with them. You got to maximize the utility of these people, and if they can't really help you, you shouldn't have them. And as I say, the moment you get other people, particularly other people's money, they will tell you that they won't tolerate that.
And your uncle, he's going to help you out anyways. His Rolodex is coming in.
Yeah, good
so
point.
That's given.
Yes. So don't take up the seat. Put someone else in there. Good point.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Okay.
Hi, I wanted to just ask, in terms of being a young company where it's only a couple of years off, how do you navigate when a board kind of wants to go in a different direction than the managing startup people? Or how do you negotiate the vision of the board and their expertise versus the direction you want to go in?
That's a great question. We actually haven't come across that type of situation. Knock on wood, we don't. And I think a lot of that goes to the overall vision of the company. I think before even the board is put together, everyone needs to be on the same page, where the company is headed. The board actually needs to believe in your vision. And once they're on board, I don't see a reason why there should be a shift, unless the market's changing or the company needs to look into another direction or needs to pivot towards a different model, which is understandable.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And again, by the time you have venture capital investment, you know the old line, VCs believe in the golden rule. You as the gold rules. They will write in to a shareholders agreement certain rights and voting rights. And I have seen companies where the board turfs out the founding CEO, who remains a significant shareholder, but not a majority. As long as you and your co-founder, and you, assuming that you agree, own the majority of shares, remember that hierarchy. You know, as management, the board can tell you what to do. As shareholders, you can vote the board out. It's a bit silly, but if you own the company, you listen carefully, because sometimes they're telling you not to drive off the cliff, but ultimately it's yours. As you take on investment and your ownership percentage shrinks, you reach a point where the rest of the shareholders can outvote you. And if you have a violent disagreement, the people who have put money in will not hesitate to remove you. They are there to make money, but above all else, to protect their money. They will not let you, in their minds, squander money foolishly. And I am actually speaking as a recovering VC. My partners and I were once called bottom-feeding scum suckers by a company we had actually invested in, because we disagreed profoundly with the direction that they were going. And it didn't help that I said that was logically impossible, because bottom feeder scum sits at the top, and bottom feeders can't be simultaneously scum suckers. But that's another. That was a measure of the disconnect between ourselves and the company. So yeah, it can get ugly, and if you don't own the majority, you who created this and who have put your blood, sweat, and tears in can be out the door. And it does happen. Not that often, but it can happen. I think Aaron touched on something, and I think communication. Talk to, never get too far separated, listen. By the time you get to that stage, you've polarized. It's like any relationship. You know, things can go sour. Communication is always what they tell you to keep a relationship together. It's the same with investors and your board members on your company. You always need to be finding, if necessary, compromises in order to keep things going forward.
I'll chime in on that. At the same time, investors and your board of directors and your advisors, they need encouragement as well. You need to ensure that the path you're headed is the correct vision of the company. You need to, like Tony mentioned, constantly communicate with them, keep them updated, talk to them on even little milestones. All it is a little email. Keep them updated, and that's very important.
Okay.
Thank you for the really interesting conversation here. I have a question on hiring and firing. As most startups goes, just hiring and firing employees and founders are pretty hard. When it comes to advisors, since most of these people, they're more experienced, they're more powerful than probably the founders are, I imagine hiring and firing is even more difficult. For hiring, what can you offer as a startup with very low on resource and need a lot of autonomy? What can you offer to attract them? And for firing, for example, how do you let them go? There's a specific incident when I kind of think when there's existing advisors that had basically a personal history with the potential advisors. At the time you acquired the former, you didn't know. By the time you need to get the second person on board, the second person said, no, I can't get on board because the other person's on board. And you realize, okay, you need the second person more than the first person. And what do you do then?
That's an interesting situation. So, well, first you need to see that what they're bringing on board, is it valuable or not? Like, an advisor shouldn't be really looking at another advisor. they should be interested in you, and if what matters to them is why is he on board? Is he really the right, or she the right person and should be bringing on board in the first place, right?
Yeah, and I'm actually just looking at my notes. One of the things that I said is, who do you not want on your board are ego trippers. Again, it's like any functioning group. And this is something, the chemistry has to work. And when you're small, yeah, when you're bigger and your board is 15, yeah, you have strong personalities, you can try to manage that, but the failure of that is what lands on the front page of the Financial Post or the Globe and Mail, board battles and factions on boards. You can't afford that when you're small. So you need people, I'm going to add to the list of all the criteria, you need people with whom the chemistry works. Part of that, if it's the board, Karan has already said about ESOP. In my experience, a bang-up meal never hurts, and I'm partially serious. When they come, if they're traveling, and there's going to be overnight stay, building social ties within this group to facilitate tougher conversations never hurts, okay? This is, you're managing people, and if you're the CEO, and this is the classic case, you're managing up as well as you're managing down, and there's an art to that. So it can be little things, but you will learn, and sometimes you can't bounce someone off a board of directors that easily because they were chosen by shareholders. In shareholders' agreements, there will often be rules that say this fund gets 1 seat, the founders get 2 seats, and this. If someone, and remember, all board members are there for the good of the company, not simply a particular shareholder. And I should put a caution, neither of us are lawyers, so take what we say on things like this with a grain of salt. But the experience, in that case, if it's a VC and their rep is misbehaving, go to someone at the fund and say, they're not working well with us. That should almost be last resort, but that's your only lever. Advisors, thank you very much for all the help you've given us. Yeah. Goodbye. They serve at your pleasure. Now, that's a little harsh, particularly if you've given them stock or stock options, which isn't so common on advisory boards. But they do serve at your pleasure. And if there's one who is just not working with the rest, you first have to be sure, are they actually saying things that are really important, just in a manner that's offensive? You judge. You may have to put up with that. If they're offensive and not useful, thank them kindly, and say goodbye. You can be slightly more diplomatic than that, but you have very different choices between the two different types of boards.
So how do you attract someone to acquire someone to be your advisor?
How do we get someone on a board?
You mentioned that there's often not stock option involved. So how do you use to attract an advisor as a startup?
That's an interesting question. So you can solicit them through LinkedIn if you have certain names. Reach out to them through your existing circle, and actually reach out to them with, for example, a one-pager. Tell them why you're putting together a board, what are you trying to accomplish, and what do you need help with. And if that's something they can help with, and I think they would be willing. They are willing to. That's for most of the part the experience we've had.
Well, say in this case you have specific people in mind, but what can you offer them in terms of value to convince them that you should be on our board?
So in terms of value, one of the options I mentioned was stock options, right? But in terms of they should vest once they deliver. So if they've agreed to make some introductions with potential clients, tell him or her, you know what, make those introductions, and the stocks will vest once him or her has delivered.
Yeah, and I think it's, this is a little bit like selling. If you're out there in the marketplace and you're at trade shows, events, and you hear someone give a talk, you say, wow, it'd be fantastic. You gotta engineer a way to meet them. Talk up what you're doing. See if they get excited. Follow them. It's no different than selling anything else. You're selling your company to get them involved. And so it's not easy, but the more you see potential people who could serve, the bigger your pool, then the more likely you'll be able to talk someone in to join. Because most of the time when you're really early, you won't sell them with dollars. Stock options are nice if you go global. Yes, they're probably not doing it for that reason. When you're public, then you're paying X thousand dollars per meeting at a flat rate per year. Those are the professional directors, very different cadre. I mean, there are formal schools for learning to be a director. By the time you're big enough, you will be looking for people who have that certification, because you're going to need it. So, I don't think there's any simple single answer. You just got to, you want to get someone, it is very much like hiring. You want to get someone to join your team.
Yeah.
What have you got to motivate them? And sexy company and a chance to work with a really great team and see something exciting. By and large, you're looking for people, as Karan has said, who have seen that. They want to be a part of the excitement. If you can sell that, you'd be amazed at who you can get to come on board. So we're at 000. Let's take one more question.
Okay, try to make it short. Okay. I understand that when we try to hire advisor or directors, they should bring in direct values of the company, right? But besides that, other than experience, competencies, connections, something like that, do we have to consider something like if these people will enhance the company image, or do we need to consider we need to bring in? I'm not here to promote racism, but do we need to make sure that the board of directors, they include different kind of people from different heritage background, like race or skin color?
Or gender. You want to tackle that minefield?
Yeah. So I think that does not matter. What matters is whether they have the experience. Have they been through where you want to get to? That's what matters the most. And if you have the opportunity to bring on someone on board, and if you can get them that excited and passionate about what you're doing, it really doesn't matter where they come from. As long as they can help you out, scale your company, help you find clients, and help you out whatever you're trying to achieve based on what stage you are in.
Yeah, I think my general advice on that is the same as in hiring. For staff or for boards, you should be gender, race, colorblind. You are going for excellence. You need to be sure that you are looking broadly enough that the pools you are looking encompass those people, but you go for excellence and people who will do the job. I think that is a key thing. It's more, I always look, it's not so much you hire, who's in the short list. If your short list is only WASPs, that's probably not a good sign. If you have a good representation, who you actually hire, hey, everybody's got different skills. You're looking for the good fit. So search widely and then hire the best.
Tony and Karan, thank you so much for today's discussion. Very informative.